The great hall was filled with noise. Thousands of beings from different worlds sat in their seats, talking and arguing. The crystal walls of the building made every sound echo. Some creatures had 4 arms, others had tentacles, and a few looked like giant insects. They all belonged to the Galactic Federation, the group that ruled most of the galaxy. Ambassador Yunwu stood up from his seat. He was tall and blue, with silver markings on his face. His people, the Zephyrians, were known for being smart and careful. He raised his hand and the hall became quiet. "Today we decide an important matter," Yunwu said. His voice was clear and strong. "Should we lift the ban on humans joining our military forces?" A wave of laughter filled the hall. Many delegates shook their heads or made sounds of disapproval. In the corner, sitting alone in the observer section, was Ji-min. She was the only human in the room. Her face stayed calm, but her hands were tight in her lap. The ban on humans had been in place for 100 years. It started after something called the Kepler Station incident. The official record said that human soldiers had caused too much damage during a rescue mission. They had saved people, but they had also destroyed a lot of property. The Federation decided that humans were too wild and dangerous to fight alongside other species. Since then, humans could only work as traders, diplomats, or scientists. They were not allowed to join any military operation. Most species thought this was fair. They saw humans as primitive creatures who could not control themselves in battle. Tae-hyun, a representative from the Velkari people, stood up. His species looked like tall, thin cats with golden fur. "Humans are reckless," he said. "They act without thinking. They put others in danger with their wild behavior." More voices joined in agreement. So Young, who represented the insect-like Krell, clicked her mandibles. "Human military tactics make no sense," she said. "They do not follow proper combat rules. They cannot be trusted in organized warfare." Ji-min listened to each speaker. She had heard these same arguments many times before. Every year she came to this hall to ask for the ban to be lifted. Every year, the answer was the same. A creature that looked like a walking tree spoke next. "Humans are too young as a species," it said in a deep, slow voice. "They have not learned wisdom yet. War requires careful planning and patience. Humans have neither." Minho, a Zephyrian military commander, sat near the front of the hall. He had fought in many battles and was respected by all species. He watched Ji-min carefully as the other delegates spoke. Something about her calm face made him curious. The debate went on for hours. Representative after representative stood up to speak against humans. They talked about human emotions being too strong. They said humans made decisions too quickly. They worried that humans would start fights instead of ending them. Finally, Hyunwoo called for the vote. The process was formal and official. Each species had to announce their choice clearly. One by one, they voted against lifting the ban. The Velkari vote no. The Krell vote no. The Manthari vote no. The counting continued. When it was finished, the result was clear. 847 species voted to keep the ban. Only 23 voted to lift it. Most of those 23 were small, weak species that had been helped by humans in the past. Laughter filled the hall again. Some delegates clapped their hands or tentacles. Others made happy sounds in their own languages. The message was clear. Humans would remain banned from military service. Yunwoo looked satisfied. "The matter is settled," he said. "The ban remains in place." Then Ji-min stood up. The laughter died down as she walked to the speaking platform. She was much smaller than most of the other beings in the room. Her dark hair was pulled back and she wore a simple blue uniform. She looked very ordinary compared to the colorful aliens around her. "May I speak?" she asked. Hyunwoo looked annoyed but nodded. "You may have 2 minutes." Ji-min looked out at the sea of alien faces. Many were smiling or looked amused. They thought this would be entertaining. She took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone. "You have made your choice," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "You believe humans are too dangerous, too wild, too reckless to fight beside you." More laughter came from the crowd. Some delegates whispered jokes to each other. Jimin continued. "You think our emotions make us weak. You think our quick decisions make us foolish. You think our willingness to take risks makes us unreliable." Taehyun called out, "Exactly right." "You'll see," Jimin said, ignoring the interruption. Her voice grew stronger. "When the time comes, you'll see what humans are truly capable of." The laughter grew louder. Someone shouted, "Is that a threat?" Jimin shook her head. "It's not a threat. It's a promise. When you face something that your careful plans cannot defeat, when your patience runs out, when your wisdom fails you, you will remember this day." She paused and looked directly at Hyunwoo. "And you will call us." The ambassador's smile faded slightly. "We have the strongest military in the galaxy," he said. "We have no need for human help." "We shall see," Jimin replied. She walked away from the platform and headed for the exit. The delegates watched her go, still laughing and making jokes. But Minho noticed that her back was straight and her steps were confident. She did not look like someone who had just been defeated. As the hall began to empty, Minho found himself thinking about Jimin's words. He had fought many battles and had seen many enemies. Most defeated opponents looked angry or sad when they lost, but Jimin had looked patient, like she was waiting for something. The Zephyrian commander shook his head. Humans were banned, for good reasons. The Kepler station incident had shown that they could not be controlled in combat. Their emotional nature made them unreliable. The Federation had made the right choice. But as he left the hall, Minho could not forget the look in Jimin's eyes. It was not the look of someone who had given up. It was the look of someone who knew a secret that others did not. The vote was over. The humans would remain banned. The galaxy would continue as it always had, safe and orderly under Federation rule. At least, that was what everyone believed. 3 months had passed since the vote in the Federation Council. Life in the galaxy continued as normal. Trade ships moved between worlds, carrying goods and passengers. Scientists studied new planets and stars. Diplomats worked to solve small problems between different species. On Earth, Jimin sat in a large meeting room with other human leaders. The walls were covered with star maps and reports from across the galaxy. President Dongwu, an older man with gray hair, listened as Jimin told them about the council meeting. "They laughed," Jimin said. "Even when I warned them, they just laughed." General Ye Jin, the head of Earth's military forces, frowned. She was a tough woman who had spent her life preparing for war. "Do they know what's coming?" she asked. Dongwu shook his head. "Our deep space sensors picked up the signals 2 weeks ago. The Federation's sensors should have detected them by now, but they haven't said anything. The signals were strange and old. They came from the dark space between galaxies, moving fast toward the outer rim worlds. The pattern matched something from ancient records, something that had not been seen for 300 years. The Devourers were returning." Far away, on his flagship in the Zephyrian fleet, Commander Minho reviewed his battle plans. The ship's bridge was clean and organized, with crew members working quietly at their stations. Everything followed strict military rules. Minho studied the tactical displays. The Federation military was built on order and discipline. Every ship had its place in formation. Every weapon had its proper use. Every battle was fought according to rules that had been developed over thousands of years. These rules had served them well. Pirates were easily defeated when they tried to attack Federation ships. Small wars between member species were quickly ended with minimal damage. The galaxy was peaceful because the Federation military was strong and organized. But Minho felt uneasy. He had been a soldier for 30 years, and his instincts told him that something was wrong. Reports from the outer rim were getting stranger. Ships were disappearing. Colonies were going silent. Long-range sensors were picking up movement in deep space. The Federation High Command said it was nothing to worry about. Probably just pirates with new technology. The standard response would be enough to handle any threat. On the mining world of Xerion Prime, colonist Sujin worked the night shift at the sensor station. The planet was small and not very important, located on the edge of Federation space. Most people had never heard of it. Sujin watched the displays that showed space around the planet. Her job was boring most of the time. Occasionally, a trade. Ship would pass by, or a patrol vessel would check on them. Tonight was different. The sensors showed something moving in the dark beyond the outer planets. It was big, much bigger than any ship in the Federation fleet, and it was moving toward them. Sujin called her husband Wubin. He worked in the mining operations and knew more about space technology than she did. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the screen. "What do you think it is?" Wubin looked at the readings and shrugged. "Probably an asteroid," he said. "The sensors sometimes pick up rocks that are drifting through space." "It's too big to be an asteroid," Sujin replied, "and it's moving too fast." "Don't worry about it," Wubin said. "If it was dangerous, the Federation would have warned us. They have the best military in the galaxy. Nothing can threaten us." Sujin wanted to report what she had seen, but she knew no one would take her seriously. Xerion Prime was not important enough to get attention from the military. She decided to keep watching and hope that Wubin was right. Yunsu was a cargo pilot who flew between different worlds. Her ship was small but fast, and she knew the space routes better than most people. She had been flying for 15 years, and had never seen anything like what was happening now. Military ships were moving in secret. She picked up coded messages on the emergency channels. The signals were encrypted, but she could tell they were urgent. Something big was happening, but humans were not being told about it. Yunsu changed her course toward the nearest Federation outpost. If there was trouble coming, maybe she could help. Humans might be banned from military service, but they were. Still part of the galactic community. She had friends among the other species, and she would do what she could to protect them. Back on the Federation Council world, Ambassador Hyun-woo met with his military advisors. The room was secure, with no recording devices and no outside listeners. The conversation was classified at the highest level. "The outer rim sensors have confirmed it," said Admiral Keshra, a reptilian being with scales that changed color. "Multiple large objects moving toward Federation space. They match no known ship designs." Hyun-woo felt a chill. Could they be from an unknown species? "Possible," the Admiral replied. "But the energy signatures are strange. Our computers cannot identify the technology." "How long until they reach our territory?" "At current speed, approximately 6 months. But, sir, there's something else. The objects seem to be consuming matter as they move. Asteroids, debris, even small moons are disappearing when they pass by." Hyun-woo stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the peaceful city where millions of beings from different worlds lived and worked together. The Federation had created this peace through strength and wisdom. Nothing had threatened it for centuries. "Begin quiet preparations," he ordered. "Move the second and third fleets to defensive positions, but do not cause panic. We will handle this threat the same way we have handled all others." The Admiral nodded and left. Hyun-woo remained at the window, thinking about the vote 3 months ago. Jimin's words came back to him. "When you face something that your careful plans cannot defeat, you will remember this day." He pushed the thought away. The Federation had defeated every enemy it had ever faced. Their military was the strongest in the galaxy. Whatever was coming from deep space would be stopped by superior tactics and overwhelming force. On Earth, the Human Defense Council continued its secret meetings. They knew what the Federation leaders were just beginning to suspect. The ancient enemy was returning, and this time there might be no escape. General Ye Jin looked at the star charts. "How long do we have?" 6 months, maybe less, replied the intelligence officer. "The Devourers are moving faster than they did in the old records. And the Federation still won't lift the ban?" Jimin shook her head. "They're too proud. They think their organized fleets and careful tactics will be enough." President Dongwu sighed. "Then we prepare alone. If the time comes, we'll be ready." Across the galaxy, life continued normally. Most beings had no idea that an ancient evil was moving toward them. They trusted in the Federation's strength and the peace that had lasted for centuries. But a few people watched the stars and wondered what was coming. They felt the calm before the storm, the quiet moment before everything would change forever. The galaxy was about to learn that some enemies could not be defeated by rules and formations. Some threats required a different kind of response, a different kind of courage. And humanity, banned and dismissed, waited patiently for the call that they knew would come. The attack came without warning. One moment, the Talarian system was peaceful and quiet. The next moment, space itself seemed to tear open. The ships that emerged were unlike anything in the Federation databases. They were massive, each one the size of a small moon. Their surfaces were dark and smooth, covered with strange patterns that hurt to look at. They moved with purpose, heading straight for the inner planets. On the Federation monitoring station at Talarian Beta, Lieutenant J. Wan watched his sensors in disbelief. "Sir," he called to his commander, "you need to see this." Commander Boksu, a four-armed being from the Altarian species, looked at the readings. His face went pale. "How many ships?" 47 confirmed, sir. Maybe more still coming through. "Send an emergency message to Federation Command. Priority 1. We are under attack by unknown forces." But before the message could be sent, the monitoring station went silent. The Devourer ships had noticed them. The alien vessels moved toward the planets with terrible efficiency. They did not fire weapons in the way Federation ships did. Instead, they projected beams of energy that seemed to dissolve everything they touched. Asteroids, space stations, even the outer planets began to break apart. The debris did not float away into space. Instead, it was pulled into the Devourer ships, consumed and processed. The enemy was literally eating the solar system. News of the attack reached Federation Command within hours. Admiral Keshra gathered his best officers in the war room. The holographic display showed the Talarian system, or what was left of it. 3 planets gone, reported Intelligence Officer Su Bin. 2 space stations destroyed, no survivors detected. Min Ho stood with the other fleet commanders, studying the tactical display. "What kind of weapons can destroy an entire planet?" "Unknown," replied the Admiral. "But we have more immediate concerns. Long-range sensors show the enemy fleet is moving toward the Proxima sector. 7 Federation worlds are in their path." Yunwu entered the room, his usual calm replaced by urgency. "How many ships do we have available?" "The 3rd fleet is closest," said Min Ho. 48 ships, including my flagship. We can reach the Proxima sector in 18 hours. "Do it!" ordered the Admiral. "Use standard battle formation, maintain safe distance, and probe their defenses. Do not engage unless you have a clear advantage." Min Ho nodded and left to prepare his fleet. He had fought pirates and rebels before, but this felt different. The enemy ships were too big, too strange, but Federation tactics had never failed before. He would follow the rules and trust in his training. The 3rd fleet moved into formation as they approached the enemy. Min Ho's ships spread out in a perfect line, weapons charged and shields at maximum power. It was textbook military procedure. Designed to maximize firepower while minimizing risk. "Enemy ships detected," reported his tactical officer, Kyung Ho. "They're not responding to our warning signals." Maintain formation, Minho ordered. Begin long-range bombardment. The Federation ships opened fire. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes streaked across space toward the Devourer fleet. The weapons were the most advanced in the galaxy, capable of destroying any known ship design. The attacks hit their targets perfectly. Brilliant explosions lit up space as the weapons found their mark. For a moment, Minho thought they had succeeded. Then, the light faded and the enemy ships were still there. The Devourer vessels had absorbed the energy attacks, their dark hulls unchanged. Worse, they seemed to be growing larger, feeding on the power that had been thrown at them. "Sir," Kyung-ho said, his voice shaking, "our weapons had no effect." Before Minho could respond, the Devourer ships returned fire. But they did not use energy weapons. Instead, they released swarms of smaller craft, each one moving faster than any Federation fighter. The small ships swarmed over the Federation fleet. Like angry insects, they attached themselves to the hulls of Minho's vessels and began to cut through the armor. Federation ships that had never been damaged in battle were torn apart in minutes. "Break formation!" Minho shouted. "All ships, evasive maneuvers!" But it was too late. The Federation crews had trained for organized battles, not chaotic swarm attacks. Half the fleet was destroyed before they could react. The remaining ships fled in disorder, their perfect formations broken. Minho's flagship was one of the few to escape. As he watched his fleet scatter, he realized that everything he knew about warfare was useless against this enemy. The reports came in quickly after that. The 7th Fleet at Proxima Gate was completely destroyed. The 2nd Fleet tried to hold the line at Vega Station, but was overwhelmed in hours. One by one, Federation strongholds fell to the advancing swarm. On Earth, the Human Defense Council watched the news feeds with grim faces. President Dong-Wu turned to General Ye Jin. "How long before they reach the core worlds?" "At their current speed. 2 weeks. Maybe less if they keep accelerating." Jimin studied the battle reports. "The Federation fleets are using the same tactics against every attack. Perfect formations, long-range bombardment, organized retreats. They're not adapting." "Why? Would they?" asked Dong-Wu. "Those tactics have worked for thousands of years." "Not against an enemy like this," Jimin replied. "The Devourers don't fight like civilized species. They don't follow rules or care about minimizing losses. They just want to destroy everything." General C. Yejin looked at the star charts. "Our scouts report that the Federation is pulling back all remaining fleets to defend the core worlds. They're going to make a final stand." "It won't work," Jimin said quietly. "They're still thinking like diplomats and administrators. They want to win without taking risks, to defeat the enemy without suffering losses. But this enemy doesn't care about acceptable casualties or strategic objectives. They just want everything dead." On the Federation Council world, panic filled the streets. Citizens who had lived in peace for centuries watched the news broadcasts in horror. Entire worlds were going dark. The mighty Federation fleets were being destroyed faster than they could be rebuilt. In the council chambers, Ambassador Hyunwoo met with the remaining military commanders. The room was tense and desperate. Everything they had believed about their military superiority was crumbling. "We need new strategies," said Admiral Keshra. "The enemy doesn't respond to conventional attacks." "What about biological weapons?" suggested someone. "They're machines," replied the Admiral. "Or something like machines. Biology won't work." "Nuclear weapons?" "They absorb energy. Nuclear fire just makes them stronger." Minho spoke up. "We need to think differently. The enemy doesn't fight like us. Maybe we need to stop fighting like us." Hyunwoo looked tired and defeated. "What are you suggesting?" "I don't know," Minho admitted. "But our current approach is failing. We need help from someone who thinks differently about warfare." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what he was suggesting, but no one wanted to say it. The idea of asking humans for help seemed impossible after rejecting them so completely. Tae-hyun, the Velkari representative who had spoken against humans months ago, finally broke the silence. "You want to contact the humans?" They offered to help, Minho said. "Maybe we should have listened." "Humans are reckless and dangerous," Tae-hyun replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "They would make things worse." "Worse than complete extinction?" Minho asked. Outside the council building, emergency sirens wailed as more bad news arrived. Another Federation fleet had been destroyed. Another world had gone silent. The Devourer swarm was getting closer, and nothing seemed able to stop them. The proud Federation that had ruled the galaxy for millennia was facing its first real defeat. Their perfect tactics and superior technology meant nothing against an enemy that simply wanted to consume everything. Soon, they would have to make a choice: swallow their pride and ask the banned humans for help, or watch their civilization be devoured by an ancient evil. Time was running out, and the galaxy's last hope might be the species they had dismissed as too primitive to fight beside them. The Federation Council building shook as another explosion lit up the sky. The Devourer fleet had reached the outer edge of the core systems. Every few minutes, news came of another world falling silent, another fleet destroyed. Ambassador Hyun-woo stood in his private office, staring at the communication device on his desk. The device could send messages across the galaxy in seconds. Right now, it was set to Earth's frequency. For 2 days, he had stood here, too proud to make the call. But the reports kept coming. 12 Federation fleets destroyed, 43 worlds consumed. The enemy was only hours away from the capital system. Admiral Keshra entered the office without knocking. His scales had turned dark gray, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "Sir, the 4th Fleet is gone. The enemy has broken through our final defensive line." Hyun-woo closed his eyes. "How long do we have?" 6 hours. Maybe 8. The evacuation ships are ready, but there isn't enough space for everyone. The ambassador looked out his window at the city below. Millions of beings from hundreds of worlds lived here in peace. Children played in the parks. Families went about their daily lives, trusting that the Federation would protect them. "Send the evacuation order," Hyun-woo said quietly. "Save who you can." "Sir," the Admiral said, "there is one other option." They both looked at the communication device. The Earth frequency blinked, waiting. "They laughed at us," Hyun-woo said. "When the human diplomat warned us, we laughed." "Yes, sir. But they still offered to help." Hyun-woo picked up the device with shaking hands. He had spent his career being proud of Federation superiority. The idea of begging humans for help made him feel sick. But the alternative was the death of everything he had sworn to protect. He pressed the button. On Earth, Jimin was in the middle of a strategy meeting when the call came through. The entire Human Defense Council stopped talking as Hyun-woo's face appeared on the main screen. The proud ambassador, who had dismissed human military capabilities, looked broken. His usual confident voice was barely a whisper. "Earth," he said. "This is Ambassador Hyun-woo of the Galactic Federation. I am requesting immediate military assistance." President Dong-woo leaned forward. "What kind of assistance?" "We are facing total extinction. Our fleets have been destroyed. Our worlds are being consumed. We need—" The ambassador paused, and when he spoke again, his voice cracked. "We need warriors." The word hung in the air. For 100 years, the Federation had insisted that humans were too violent to be warriors. Now they were begging for exactly that violence. "What are you offering?" asked General Ye-jin. "Anything. Full Federation membership, territory, trade rights, voting power in the Council. Name your price." Jimin spoke for the first time. "You said we were too dangerous to fight beside you. What changed?" Hyun-woo looked directly at her through the screen. "The enemy doesn't care about our rules. They don't respond to diplomacy or organized tactics. They just kill everything. We need people who can fight the same way. You need people who are as dangerous as they are, Jimin said. Yes. General Yejin stood up. How much time do we have? Hours. The enemy fleet will reach our capital system before the day ends. If you're going to help, it has to be now. The connection ended. The Human Defense Council sat in silence for a moment. Then President Dongwu turned to General Yejin. Can we get there in time? The Deep Space Fleet is ready. 30 ships, our best crews. They can reach the capital system in 4 hours if they push the engines to maximum. Only 30 ships? Asked someone. The Federation lost hundreds of, vessels. General Yejin smiled grimly. The Federation was fighting the wrong kind of war. Within an hour, the human expeditionary force was in space. The ships were smaller than Federation vessels, built for speed and maneuverability rather than overwhelming firepower. To alien observers, they would look primitive and inadequate. Captain Seok Jin commanded the flagship Indomitable. He was a veteran of Earth's internal conflicts, a man who had learned warfare in the bloodiest battles humanity had ever fought. His crew was the same, soldiers who had seen real combat, not the organized exercises that passed for military training in the Federation. Daeyun worked at the weapons station. She was known for finding new ways to use old equipment, turning mining charges into bombs and cargo containers into missiles. The regulations said it was dangerous and unpredictable. She called it creative. Jun-ho sat at the pilot's controls. He had been court-martialed twice for ignoring orders and breaking formation during training exercises, but he had also saved more lives than any other pilot in the fleet by doing exactly what the rulebook said not to do. Approaching the battle zone, Jun-ho reported. Federation ships detected. They're in full retreat. On the tactical display, they could see the remnants of the once mighty Federation fleet. Ships limped away from the battle, their hulls damaged, their formations broken. Behind them came the Devourer swarm, dark ships moving like predators closing in for the kill. Minho's damaged flagship was among the retreating vessels. The Zephyrian commander watched his sensors as 30 small ships appeared on the edge of the system. His first thought was that someone had sent a merchant convoy into a war zone by mistake. Then he saw how they moved. Federation ships flew in careful formations, maintaining safe distances and following predetermined patterns. The human ships, scattered like a pack of hunting animals, each one taking a different path toward the enemy. "What are they doing?" asked his tactical officer, Kyung-ho. Minho had studied every military manual in the Federation database. Nothing he had learned explained what he was seeing. "I don't know." The human fleet struck the Devourer swarm from 6 different directions at once. Instead of maintaining formation, they wove between the massive enemy ships, firing at close range and disappearing before return fire could track them. Daeyun overloaded her ship's reactor to create an improvised explosive. The blast was not powerful enough to destroy a Devourer vessel, but it was enough to damage its hull and slow it down. Other human ships swarmed the wounded enemy like wolves bringing down a wounded deer. For the first time since the war began, a Devourer ship was destroyed. Jun-ho flew his fighter directly through the internal structure of an enemy vessel, his weapons blazing. The ship's corridors were too narrow for safe navigation, filled with machinery that could crush his tiny craft. But he twisted and turned through the maze, destroying critical systems until the entire Devourer ship went dark. His fighter was torn apart by debris as he escaped, but he managed to reach an escape pod before his ship exploded. Captain Seok Jin led his squadron against the largest enemy vessel. His ship's hull was breached, life support was failing, and his weapons were overheating. Any sane commander would have retreated. Instead, he accelerated toward the enemy ship, pushing his engines beyond their safety limits. He rammed the Indomitable directly into the Devourer vessel's control center, taking both ships down in a massive explosion. Minho watched the battle in amazement. The humans were doing everything wrong according to Federation military doctrine. They broke formation, ignored orders, took insane risks, and sacrificed their own ships without hesitation, and they were winning. The Devourer swarm, which had easily destroyed organized Federation fleets, found itself facing something it could not predict or counter. The humans fought like wild animals, striking from unexpected angles and retreating before the enemy could respond. More importantly, they fought like they had nothing to lose. Federation commanders worried about preserving ships and minimizing casualties. Human commanders seemed to view their own lives as just another weapon to be used if necessary. "Sir," Kyung-ho said, his voice filled with awe, "the enemy is retreating." It was true. For the first time in the war, the Devourer fleet was pulling back. They could not adapt to this new kind of warfare, could not counter an enemy that refused to follow any rules. The human fleet had lost half its ships, but they had achieved what the entire Federation military could not. They had made the ancient enemy afraid. As the battle ended, Minho received a communication from the surviving human ships. The voice belonged to Commander Insu, who had taken command after Captain Seok-jin's sacrifice. "Federation vessels, this is the human expeditionary force. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We're standing by to assist with evacuation and medical support." Minho stared at his communication screen. These humans, who had been banned from military service as too dangerous, had just offered to help save Federation civilians. They had risked everything to protect people who had rejected them. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you for coming." The response was simple and matter-of-fact. "We're here to help." For the first time in months, Minho allowed himself to hope. The galaxy now had a weapon against the Devourer threat: human courage and human sacrifice. The question was whether it would be enough to save them all. The battle for Centauri Prime became the most recorded conflict in galactic history. Every Federation news crew, every military observer, and every surviving ship had their cameras pointed at the planet as the final confrontation began. The Devourer swarm had regrouped after their defeat at the capital. They returned with more ships, darker strategies, and a hunger that seemed to grow with each world they consumed. Centauri Prime, home to 12 million beings from across the galaxy, stood directly in their path. Commander Insu sat on the bridge of his new flagship, watching the enemy fleet approach. The human force had been reinforced with volunteers from Earth, bringing their total to 47 ships. It was still a tiny force compared to the hundreds of Devourer vessels moving toward them. "Evacuation status?" he asked. Lieutenant Hae-won, his communications officer, checked her displays. "About 60% complete. The Federation transport ships are working as fast as they can, but there isn't enough time to save everyone. The Federation evacuation fleet worked desperately to load civilians onto their ships, but their procedures were slow and careful, designed to maintain order and prevent panic. Every passenger had to be processed, registered, and assigned to specific areas of the ships. Minho, now working alongside the human fleet, watched the evacuation with growing frustration. "We need more time," he told Insu over the communication link. "Then we'll buy you more time," Insu replied simply. The human ships moved to intercept the Devourer swarm while the evacuation continued. They knew they were outnumbered 20-1. They knew most of them would not survive. But they also knew that every minute they could hold the enemy was another transport ship filled with refugees. Da-Yun had survived the previous battle and was now aboard the destroyer Defiant. She looked at her weapons display and made a decision that broke every safety regulation in the manual. "All power to forward weapons," she ordered. "Shut down life support, artificial gravity, everything except engines and guns." Her captain, Junho, stared at her. "That's suicide. The reactor will overheat in minutes." "Then we better make those minutes count," Da-Un replied. The Defiant charged into the enemy formation like a comet of destruction. With all power focused on its weapons, the small ship hit with the force of a vessel 10 times its size. It tore through 3 Devourer ships before its reactor finally exploded, taking 2 more enemies with it. Junho had been given a new fighter, after his previous one was destroyed. This time his mission was different. Instead of attacking enemy ships, he was tasked with something even more dangerous. He had to fly through the Devourer formation and plant tracking beacons on their command vessels. The journey was suicidal. The space between enemy ships was filled with debris, energy weapons, and swarms of smaller craft. No pilot in the Federation would have attempted it. Junho flew through the maze of death like he was born for it. He twisted between laser beams, dove under massive hulls, and somehow managed to plant beacons on 6 different command ships before his fighter was finally hit. As his ship broke apart around him, Junho managed to send one last message. Target. Coordinates transmitted. Light them up. The human fleet used those coordinates to focus their fire on the Devourer command vessels. Without central coordination, the enemy swarm began to lose its deadly efficiency. Captain Seok Jin's younger brother, Wu Jin, commanded the cruiser Vengeful. When he saw the evacuation ships still loading civilians, he made the same choice his brother had made. He would sacrifice everything to save others. All ships, this is Vengeful, he broadcast. We're going to ram the enemy flagship. Continue. The evacuation. The Vengeful turned toward the largest Devourer vessel, a monster the size of a small moon. Wu Jin pushed his engines to maximum power, knowing the ship would not survive the impact. But if he could destroy or damage the enemy flagship, it might disrupt their entire battle plan. Sir, his tactical officer said, we could try to escape after firing our weapons. Wu Jin shook his head. The enemy needs to know we're serious. They need to understand that humans will pay any price to protect innocent lives. The Vengeful struck the Devourer flagship at full speed. The explosion was visible from orbit, a brilliant flash that lit up the entire battle zone. When the light faded, both ships were gone, but the sacrifice worked. The Devourer fleet, faced with enemies who would literally die to stop them, began to hesitate. For the first time, the ancient machines seemed to understand fear. Minho coordinated the evacuation while watching the human fleet destroy itself to save others. He had been a soldier for 30 years, but he had never seen anything like this. Federation doctrine taught that preserving military assets was the key to victory. Human doctrine seemed to be that victory meant nothing if innocent people died. Another transport ship is loaded, reported his communications officer. That's 80% of the population evacuated. The humans are down to 12 ships, Minho replied, watching the tactical display. They can't hold much longer. Commander. Insu's voice came over the radio, calm despite the chaos around him. Federation vessels, begin final evacuation phase. We'll cover your retreat. What about your ships? Minho asked. We'll be fine, Insu lied. Everyone knew the remaining human ships would not survive another hour of combat. The last transport. Ships lifted off from Centauri Prime as the human fleet made its final stand. Insu's flagship, now the only heavy cruiser left in the human force, positioned itself between the Devourer swarm and the fleeing evacuation fleet. All remaining ships form up on me, Insu ordered. We're going to show these machines what humans are made of. The 11 surviving human vessels charged directly at the enemy fleet. They had no chance of victory, no hope of survival. But they could buy time for the refugees to escape, and that was enough. The footage of that final charge was broadcast across the galaxy. Beings who had never heard of humans watched as the small ships flew into certain death to save strangers they had never met. The camera feed showed human crew members working calmly at their stations even as their ships broke apart around them. One recording captured Da-Yun's final moments as she manually overloaded her ship's reactor while enemy boarding craft cut through the hull. Another showed Junho's wingman, Yu Jin, staying behind to cover a damaged Federation ship even though his own fighter was on fire. The most powerful footage came from Insu's flagship. As devourer vessels surrounded his ship, he made one last broadcast to the galaxy. "This is Commander Insu of the Human Expeditionary Force," he said, his voice steady as explosions rocked his bridge. "The evacuation is complete. 12 million lives have been saved. We consider this mission a success." The transmission ended as his ship disappeared in a ball of fire. The Devourer fleet, having destroyed the human force, found that their victory felt hollow. The evacuation fleet had escaped. The planet had been emptied of life before they could consume it. For the first time in their existence, they had been denied their prize by the sheer determination of their enemies. Across the galaxy, the battle footage played on every news channel. In the Federation Council chambers, delegates who had once laughed at human primitive aggression watched in stunned silence. The recording showed humans doing things that made no logical sense. They sacrificed expensive ships to save single refugee vessels. They stayed behind to cover retreats instead of preserving themselves for future battles. They threw away their own lives without hesitation to protect people they barely knew. Ambassador Yun Wu stood slowly as the footage ended. The chamber was completely quiet. No one spoke. No one moved. "Motion to formally lift all restrictions on human military participation," he said, his voice barely audible, "and to offer full Federation membership with command privileges." The vote was unanimous. Not a single delegate opposed the motion. The species that had been banned as too dangerous for military service was now being given the highest honors the Federation could offer. Jimin, who had returned to the Council as Earth's official representative, stood to address the assembly. She looked out at the faces that had once mocked her warnings. 3 months ago, you asked what humans were capable of, she said. Today, you have seen a small part of it. 12 million lives were saved because 30 humans decided that was more important than their own survival. She paused, looking directly at each delegate who had voted against humanity. But understand this, what you witnessed today was humans, at their most restrained. We showed mercy to our enemies. We followed your rules of war. We tried to minimize destruction and protect civilians. The chamber remained silent. You have seen humans when we are trying to be civilized, Jimin continued. Pray that you never see us when civilization fails. Pray that you never see what humans become when we stop caring about rules and start caring only about results. She sat down, leaving the delegates to contemplate her words. They had lifted the ban on humans, but now they understood why it had existed in the first place. Humans were not too primitive for war. They were too human for anything less than total commitment to it. The galaxy had been saved, but at a cost that would be remembered forever. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through superior technology or brilliant strategy, but through simple, terrible courage.